the territory bands. Basically, our presentation is this, a flashback to the past, to talk about this great era and how it was so important, and how we can use this to teach our students history so they can become better musicians within our ensembles. We don't always realize that because we're so busy trying to just teach the music that we don't always take that time to give information to them. And we're going to hit on that. That's going to be one of our questions at the end of the definitely.
The training ground, I'm down in Mead for all practical purposes and intention. And I'm honored to be here, believe me. It's an honor to be able to make this presentation at this juncture in history. It's right on time. Mr. Chancellor and we often talked about the changing of the guard and how the new guard is now positioning itself to be at the forefront of this music. And in order to do that, you have to know where you fit in the grand scheme of things. Where did you come from? Where is your history? What school did you come from? What role did your school play? What role did your area play? Oftentimes, it was not one particular town, but maybe a half a dozen towns in a region. You say,
we're going to talk about the regions now.
Right, but to say how a person got where he is and where he's going to go, he would have to tell you this. And I think that that's what's absent today, and all of us are going to have to work on that. That's very necessary. Some of the towns of the circuit.
Okay, well, we're going to go through the towns.
Yeah, but this here thing about the Chitlin circuit bothers me. And it does bother me because that generation don't know what that was.
Oh, this generation?
It was before then. Now, Dr. Warwick Carter was here, Willis Kirk, any of them, that's the Chitlin circuit. Because when you guys came along, they had refrigerators. We took 50 pounds of ice up a back steps for a lady, and she let us room there all night until we got the bus the next day out of town. So let's get that straightened out right now. That was the Chitlin circuit. Now, when you got to Cincinnati, Ohio, that was the end of the Chitlin circuit. Anything below Cincinnati, Ohio was called tobacco warehouses. You worked in a theater where tobacco leaves were up over the stage lights, and Lucky Strikes or Pell Mell or one of them owned the building or the property. That's how it got the name of tobacco warehouses. Once we get that straightened out, then we can move on up to your generation that put the tag on that they know everything about Chitlin circuit. But it was over with when they got here. But the West Coast bunch, many of them came out of the dominant South General. I want you to talk about that briefly.
Well, there were a migration of musicians from the East Coast, but in general, the migration to California came out of the South, out of Texas, out of Louisiana, and some out of Alabama and Mississippi. Traditionally, most of the people from Oklahoma stopped in Nevada and Las Vegas. There were fewer musicians coming from Oklahoma to California, partially because Oklahoma was also a center for one of the great territorial bands by Ernie Fields. Ernie Fields had a territorial band in Oklahoma that was raising as much cane as McKinley's Cotton Pickers. So the West Coast was a place where you had the Navy shipyards, you eventually had the auto industry, but you had work, so musicians came it wasn't Highway 10 then. Everyone talked about Route 66, and they came through to get to the West Coast.
We want to get to this question because we got 5 minutes, and how directors can share this information, how it's important. And I'm going to have each one of us, we'll start with you, Bob. How can we share this information, and how is it important?
Well, I guess that I'd like to take it a little bit different direction here for just a second and talk about it a little bit more globally, because I think it drifts down. You know, the music is, as we all know, an oral music, and oral history is something that I don't believe that any of us have taken seriously enough in terms of documentation. And I have some ideas as to how I would like to see our history be documented. I think that being able to support and honor and present a person such as Donald Mead is one of the very, very important steps to doing that. And I'm anxious to try to find ways for us to continue to do just this. But as Marvin said at the beginning, speaking about history and having historical context to the music is very important. Understanding it in terms of its national impact to not only the music in terms of jazz, but how it impacts the music of today. This is one of the things that I think as an educator that I've found that we tend not to want to do. Some jazz educators don't want to give it up to the linkage to contemporary music, and I think that's a mistake, because young people want to find why it's relevant. And so that's what I think history does for us in the study of all this and oral history.
You've heard the African term griot. You also have heard the term oral tradition. When you deal with a griot, you're dealing with the history from the beginning. When you deal with an oral tradition, you're dealing with the beginning of the tradition and you're passing it on. And I've noticed that today's teachings only go back approximately 30 years in the teaching of this music. This music was founded over 100 years ago. And the fundamental foundation of what we do today is based on that 100-year back period. And I find that in order for people to understand why there is jazz and how jazz shaped America, it's important to go back those 100 years. Because I've noticed that most of my students don't understand that there would be no popular music had it not been for jazz, because jazz was the popular music. Jazz was the dance music. The great drummers were vaudeville hoofers, which means that the elements of dance, the elements of show, the elements of presentation were all a part of jazz. And we have since lost that element of presentation. You have musicians walking on stage now in holy blue jeans and white shirts out of their pants. That's not jazz. Jazz was a form of music that you could take to the White House. You could take it to the embassy. You could take it all over the world representing this country. And now we have taken it so lightly that the tradition of what these great musicians have set up has been lost, because we haven't gone back and done the research. Because we go into the books that we have now, and those books don't deal with the fundamental foundation of what this music was built on, the blood, the sweat, the toil, and the historical perspective of this country for what this music really represents. You know, we're all here because we love the music and we're seeking the information. It is also our duty to go forth orally, musically, and educationally to spread this music to our peers.
Amen.